Welcome to the NABS podcast. NABS is the support organisation for those working in advertising, marketing and media. I'm your host, Louise Scody. Each week I'll be chatting with someone from our industry to find out how they support themselves and those around them through challenging times as well as the day-to-day. And it's all to help you support your own mental wellness. I can't wait to start chatting. Hamish Nicklin is co-founder and CEO of Agentflow, who build AI solutions that help businesses free their people from operational drudge and unlock new pathways to growth. Before this, Hamish spent 25 years leading media and technology businesses through periods of significant transformation. His impressive CV includes roles as CEO of Dentsu Media UK, Chief Revenue Officer at The Guardian, and nearly a decade in senior roles at Google. Hamish is also a trustee at NABS, and he co-founded the Helena Sips Wine Academy with his wife. He lives on the Isle of Wight with his family, and he has an insatiable curiosity about what's possible when you're willing to learn something completely new. Welcome to the NABS podcast, Hamish. How are you doing today?
Oh, hi, Louise. Thank you so much for having me. And what a lovely intro that is.
Oh, do you know what? It's an absolute pleasure. When I was rehearsing this before, my producer and I were wondering, is your wife actually called Helena, or is that just a completely random name for the Wine Academy?
No, she's actually called Helena. Her handle on social is Helena Sips. And it's the best job in the world what she's got, because she's a drinks journalist. So that means she gets sent bottles and bottles and bottles of wine, whiskey, gin, vodka, beer, everything, you name it. We get sent bottles of it every day.
Amazing. So you get to have the proceeds as well then?
I do. Well, do you know what? I don't anymore. When she first started doing this about 15 years ago, we were just constantly pissed because we couldn't get used to the fact that we had so much booze around the house. It was like a kid in a toy shop, but very quickly the novelty wore off. So yeah, but I do get to enjoy it sometimes.
I presume you haven't been drinking before. I mean, whatever floats your boat, but you're sober right now, right?
Do you know what? It's 2:00 on a Friday. And these days I can confirm that I am completely sober.
Indeed. Well, listen, we're very happy to have you here, and it's even better that you're sober because we're going to talk about mental wellness as well as a load of other things as well. I'm really looking forward to our chat. So let's get straight in there. Tell us about a mental wellness challenge that you've had to face.
Okay, wow, we really are diving straight in.
We are.
Mental wellness challenge. I mean, doesn't that sound like a really gentle euphemism for the story I'm about to tell? I mean, look, for me, it was very, very serious. I suppose about almost 3 years ago to the day, it would have been on October the 11th, 2022. I mean, I can remember it crystal clear. I suppose I had what you would call a complete and utter breakdown. The day started like any other day that I'd had in the previous 5 or 6 years, with a massive surge of cortisol and adrenaline that essentially turned into a ginormous panic attack at about 3:30 in the morning. So a classic way for me to have started the day for the last 5 or 6 years. The big difference this time was that any of the normal sort of calming techniques, breathing and, all those sorts of different things that I tried to do just didn't work. And again, that wasn't completely rare. Sometimes these things just lasted, and that would be it. That would be my day started 3:30 in the morning, and then a series of panic attacks before trying to get my shit together to go to work and put a brave face on and all that sort of stuff. But because it wasn't a rare occurrence, and because it had been happening for so long, and because as a result of that, I was just exhausted, something about that morning just made me go, enough's enough. I can't go on. And I'm not going to go into the details, but had it not been for my wife, we would not be having this conversation. Right? It was that dark.
Right.
And she took control. Fabulous human being, not just because she's a wine journalist, but she took control, and she took my phone. She wrote an email to my boss and just very clearly and succinctly said what was going on. And that moment changed my life. Not only just saved it, but it changed it because one thing led to another. I had a few months off where I got incredible help, changed my perspective on all sorts of things. And then after those 3 months, I went back to work, and then things changed, right? I just had a very, very different perspective and outlook on life and relationship with work and with my place in the world. And so decided when an opportunity came up just to leave and take a sabbatical, and really spend time fixing myself, right? Although fixing implies I was broken, and we can probably talk about, you know, turns out I wasn't broken. My body was just doing exactly what it was designed to do, but it felt broken. And so I spent time resetting my nervous system, shall we say, and just
Yeah.
getting it, back to a place of normality before deciding what I wanted to do next. So that was, I suppose, that's my mental wellness challenge in a nutshell.
Yeah.
If
Yeah,
you
I just you're right, challenge was underselling that somewhat. Um, so what I find really interesting about this, and look, first of all, I have to say, I am so glad for Helena rescuing you and for
thank
you
you.
being able to get yourself back to a place where you are one of the most chirpy people I have ever met. Because to be in a place that dark must have been absolutely horrendous. And you look totally sorted now. So that's incredible.
Thank you.
What were the key things do you think that contributed to burnout? Knowing that burnout's getting loads of press right now and lots of people are talking about it and people are coming out and saying they've experienced it. We very rarely hear from someone like you who was really at the top of your game, but you were going through something that led to burnout. What was it? Was it your working pattern? Was it particular pressures? Was it a combination of everything?
All right. So obviously, since then, I've had a lot of work, therapy, uh, to understand what the hell happened. And it really, work, there were triggers at work. There were triggers. But ultimately, what led to it was not work directly. Work was, as I said, just a trigger of a bunch of belief systems that I had about myself and my relationship to the world that were embedded from a very, very young age. And I suppose this is probably going to be the case with an awful lot of people, right? That as we grow up and develop, we have a load of very small t traumas. I call them small t because you'd look at my childhood and you go, what an idyllic middle class, lovely childhood you had. But like all of us, there were small t traumas that affected us in lots of different ways. I was brought up in a very loving, but still a very Victorian Catholic style of upbringing, where, the Victorianism there was sort of like stiff upper lip, keep your emotions in check, have a absolute reverence for authority and do what you're told, sort of Victorian perspective, and total respect for people who are um, uh, more senior than you in life. And so, you combine those two sort of things. I'm not a practicing Catholic anymore, but like I, I was brought up in that way. And when you combine those two things, it's fine for, say, surviving the Blitz, but it's not cool for, modern day life. It gives you some perspectives and beliefs that can very quickly bump into some realities, especially the senior you get. And that's basically what happened. It was those core beliefs that I had because of how I was brought up. And I'm absolutely not pointing fingers at my parents or school or anything like that. It was just the way that shit was that led me to have some belief systems about who I was and how I should interact with the world that became uncomfortable when they bumped into some realities of being senior, the stresses and strains of it, the the having to do what you're told and not questioning authority, and having to deliver and having to succeed because failure is not an option. um those sorts of things really are what caused the anxiety and the panic attacks, which ultimately led to the burnout, because for 5 or 6 years I was running on 4 or 5 hours sleep a night. And that's just physically impossible. Eventually you're going to break. um yeah.
So this speaks to me as to why therapy can be so valuable, because what we don't really think about on an everyday basis is all of the baggage that we're bringing with us into the
Right.
workplace. And perhaps if you had had different circumstances in your childhood, maybe the burnout would have not happened or happened in a different way. So it's really great that you were able to kind of find a space to talk about those issues, and you're clearly at one with them now.
Yeah.
When you went back to work, Was there any sense of support around you? And did you think at that point you were basically out anyway? Like you'd had a revelation at that point?
Great question. Listen, I just want to say one thing about therapy before we get into answer that question.
Sure.
And that is that therapy was brilliant for much of it at understanding the root causes, actually. But the amount of time, because, I didn't wait until I broke to have therapy. I had it throughout that 5-year period as well, because I was trying to figure out what the fuck was going on.
Mm,
Um, and it wasn't necessary that I understood, the Victorian Catholic upbringing and all the other sort of challenges, small T traumas, until I broke. I knew all of this beforehand. So therapy on its own didn't just give me that insight. And that insight in itself, I suppose what I'm trying to say, wasn't enough on its own. It had to be coupled with a deep understanding of the central nervous system and why we act the way we do. Why the upbringing, meeting a trigger, leads to your body flooding itself with cortisol, going into fight or flight, and how you in modern day world can use the body to get yourself back out of fight or flight and to a place of calm and regulate your nervous system. That came through therapy later, but it was only a specific type of therapist because I specifically had to go and find a therapist who could help me understand not just the root causes, the Victorian Catholic upbringing, but the tools that I could have at my disposal then to say, okay, now what? How do I deal with this? Because knowing the cause on its own wasn't enough. I had to have some tools. Does that make sense?
exactly. It makes total sense. And it's come up on the podcast before because we have a therapy referral service at NABS.
Yes.
And people can be matched with a therapist after they have an assessment. And if that therapist doesn't work out, then you can go and find another therapist. And there are different modalities of therapy within that because there is not a one size fits all
Yep.
solution. I mean, I've had more therapists than I've had sandwich fillings, and that's right. You need to go and find the right chemistry with someone. So yeah, and I think that idea of tools is really important as well because you actually want to go and affect change. So when you went back to work, kind of equipped with this, were your managers supportive or were you like, no one is helping me and I want to leave?
I mean, yeah, nominally. I mean, yes, they were very, very good as a whole. The reality is, I was CEO of a media organization going through huge amounts of change, under margin pressures, all the things that every single media agency or group of media agencies will understand. And so the pressures were real, they were there. And yes, I had these tools now to cope with those. But I also had a renewed perspective on whether any of that shit really mattered.
Mm,
Right. And I suppose for someone who would, I've never really thought about it like this before, but I suppose for someone who would always try to push themselves to be successful, and the driving force behind it was those Victorian and Catholic work ethics, that suddenly when I arrived and went, yeah, those things don't matter anymore. I don't really care. Finding the drive to push myself and encourage the team and do the things that we used to do, it's sort of, I couldn't find it within me to really care that much anymore. And I suppose that's where I then just said, well, why am I doing this? And that's when I was like, let's take some time to really consider what I want to do next. So it wasn't that, work weren't supportive because frankly, they put all the right things in place to make me have a landing that was softer back into work. But I had changed. I was different. And what was really interesting was the team dynamic with me and my team. I suppose we all struggled with that because I was
yeah.
clearly a different person. And what they expected from me when I came back was the old Hamish just maybe a bit fixed, quote unquote. But actually, I was very, very different human. And as I am now, I'm a very different human to the one when I was at the Guardian or Dentsu going through all of this.
Wow. So that really puts a different slant on my next question for you, which is what's one top tip you'd give to a manager to support someone who's come back from
Ah.
burnout? But actually, can that manager expect someone coming back to have a significantly different perspective, having been through burnout, and therefore the support is difficult to predict, and you could have someone that comes back and says, "Well, I want to do a completely different job now."
Yeah, I wanted something completely different out of life. I no longer cared about I realized that it was entirely the ego that wanted the C in front of the title, the chief. I didn't really give a shit. I didn't care about the trappings of all of that stuff like I cared about before. Um, and so I wanted something completely different, which didn't involve that. I didn't want to sit in a corner office with a title and the sort of job I was doing. I realized I wanted something different from life. And so for managers who are welcoming someone back from burnout or a period out from a mental health issue or challenge, I would say to them, look, you you've got to expect a different person to come back. Because actually when you go through something like this, you sort of have to change in order to be fixed, if that makes sense. Um, because the reason that you had all of these challenges beforehand were because of some often, and I'm no psychologist here, but I understand that usually the reason it comes is because you have some core beliefs about yourself and your relationship with the world that you can never change those, right? Those are fixed, right? Some of those are absolutely fixed, what I've learned. But how you allow them to drive you and impact you changes. And you have to change that. uh, how you allow them to change you and affect you, which might mean that you're a very different person when you come back. And therefore, as a manager, knowing how you deal with that is hard. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I guess if you're prepared to have open conversations and not to try and set previous boundaries or limits on that person, that's a helpful start.
Well, I mean, I absolutely think so. And I think this is where it comes down to psychological safety, which is such a buzzword. But I've worked in places where there isn't any. And I've worked in places where there's just an abundance of it. And if you can create an environment of psychological safety where people feel totally free to express who they are, whether that be sexuality or religion or mental health challenges, then you're more likely to have an open and honest conversation with someone about what they need from you as a manager and what they're prepared to give you as an organization. And once you can have that conversation, you're more likely to get the best out of that person. Because trying to force them to be something they're not is just going to cause anxiety. And also, it's going to cause them not to deliver the best work for you. So it's in your interest to genuinely try and create this environment of psychological safety, which some people are very good at. And unfortunately, some people in our industry are terrible at, because you'll have heard the stories of the shouting and the screaming and the bullying and and the belittling. There's an awful lot of that has gone on during my career, and I'm sure still happens in many places. And it's those people who they either need to change or be shown the door because it's just unhelpful in the long run for all sorts of reasons. We there's neurological reasons why that is just a absolute waste of time, that style of leadership, and why creating psychological safety is just so powerful if you want to get employees who are highly engaged and going to deliver for you. It's just neuroscience.
Exactly. That's why we have our managers mindsets training program. And within that, we teach how you create open cultures, how you create psychological safety so that people can feel okay about discussing what's going on for them. And then they don't have all of the fear and the anxiety in their head and they can just get on with enjoying work, um, which is really good. We'll pop a link to that in the show notes. So you are now at the helm of an AI company, the all new Hamish version 2.0. And there's loads of concern around AI in the industry. The
Yeah.
people worried about, is it going to take my job? Will I be redundant? And that's impacting on people's mental wellness. So, how do you think we can adopt a positive mindset around AI? And can you genuinely tell us not to worry about this?
Um, yes, I can certainly answer that question. And can I tell you not to worry about it? I would say yes. I really would say don't worry about this.
Thank you,
Re-
because all of my friends are telling me to worry about it.
Look, okay. So The challenge with AI is there's so much hype, there's so much written about it by people who have no idea what AI really is and what it can do and what it's likely to be able to do, that I would say beware of the headlines. Right? Be very aware of be very aware of the headlines. Those ones that are sort of like almost proudly and excitedly announcing that companies have cut thousands of jobs because they've embedded AI. Those are the ones that are totally unhelpful because as far as I'm concerned, when I dig deeper, it's just PR spin. And the reality that I'm saying that I think this is nonsense is that some of those headlines came out 6 or 7 months ago. And I would be fascinated to see what LLM they're using or what AI they were using 6 or 7 months ago that was good enough to cut thousands of jobs from an organization. Like it just wasn't good enough then. And I would say even now, it's not good enough to cut thousands of jobs confidently from an organization because it's just not there. So first of all, beware of the hype and dig deeper, really understand what are these headlines. And the second thing is, don't just rely on other people to tell you about AI. Dive in yourself. Because actually, a lot of fear that we have about things in life in general is because we don't know about it. Human nature is such that we're scared of the unknown. It's inherently how we've evolved to be the apex species on the planet, right? Is one of the things that's allowed us to evolve here is our fear of the unknown because this allows us to, take precautions, do all that stuff. So it's perfectly normal to be afraid of something you don't know about, especially if it's surrounded by so much hype in headlines. So my next piece of advice is go and play with it. Get your hands dirty. Go away and build something yourself. Go and learn how to vibe code. Go and pick up a low code, no code tool and build something with AI. Because by doing so, you'll see how awesome it can be, but also you'll see its limitations. Right? I've been doing this for a long time. I mean, 20, 12, 18 months, been messing around with all the tools in detail, but playing even more closely to it for the last 3 years since ChatGPT launched its chat interface, to OpenAI's LLMs. And what I've noticed while I've been vibe coding for all this time is that it's great, but it's also terrible, you know?
That's
It's,
reassuring.
and whilst it's getting better and better and better every single day, the bits that it can't get right are still the bits that we need humans for. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
the thing I talk to my clients about all the time is yes, we will come in and we'll look at your workflows. Yes, we'll see what your people do and we'll map that out for you. We'll show you where automation can do some of that stuff for your people. But the problem is, a lot of consultants will look at this and they'll take an overly simplistic view about what it is people actually do every day. And they'll simplify it down into a bunch of tasks and workflows and say, AI can do that. And they're right, AI can. But because they've just taken that sort of 30,000 feet view of this, they don't understand all the other things that humans do in a task, all the messy bits that you can't necessarily write down in a workflow that can't be automated and probably never can really, right? And that's why I'm saying, please don't worry. Dive in, and there will be things that can definitely be automated, but make sure that the things they automate are the right things so that you are freed up to do the bits that only humans can do. And if you really can live in that space and do the bits that only humans can do, you will then become superpowered, right? And you'll become a very, very valuable employee.
That's really helpful. I feel better, and I'm going to go and get my hands dirty after this.
Do.
Now,
Yeah.
I know you as a long-standing trustee of NABS, not just an Adland legend, but you've been one of our trustees for a long time. For anyone who doesn't know about this, NABS is a charity, so obviously we have trustees who kind of sit on gold thrones. Is that what you do? And eat fancy sandwiches and talk about how you're going to make us even better. So, what made you get involved with us in the first place, and how do you see NABS making a positive impact on the advertising industry?
Well, I mean, we don't sit on gold thrones, sadly. It'd be bloody uncomfortable, wouldn't it? But so look, I think sticking with the theme of total honesty. If I'm honest, I joined NABS as a trustee for all the wrong reasons.
Was this an ego thing again?
100%.
Right.
100%. Back then I saw it like this is 2015, 2016. I think I became a trustee of NABS. And I saw it as a career move. I saw it as a chance to rub shoulders with the great and the good of the industry, a chance to have my name as something important and valuable and doing good things in a way to stand out, right? Um, and that tells you a lot about the version of me back then. Ambitious, competitive, way too focused on climbing the ladder than actually doing some good. But, and this is the really interesting thing, even though I hadn't had the first signs of my burnout and breakdown by this stage, it only took a few meetings, even that version of me, to really understand the value that NABS brought to the industry. Because again, back then it was 2015, 16, and the mental health crisis, and I will call it a crisis, that it seems that the industry is going through right now, it either wasn't being spoken about, which I don't think it was quite the case. I think it just hadn't started to the extent that we're seeing it now. Um, you could still see the value that NABS was bringing to people, right? In terms of the support it was giving people around harassment at the workplace, be that sexual or just general bullying, toxic workplaces, the support that it gave people, the support that it was giving people to deal with difficult situations and redundancy, the support it was giving people about advice to deal with bullies and tough situations at work and difficult to deal with people. It was massive, as well as the financial grants that it was giving to people, and still does, of course. That level of emotional support and advice, it was very clear after the first few meetings just how important and powerful NABS was back then. And then, of course, I started having my own challenges, and I realized that, just incredibly powerful and important NABS was. So, whilst my motivations for being with NABS have definitely changed, thankfully, I'm still incredibly proud to be something that is such a important part of the community that is the advertising industry.
I've been working for NABS since 2018, and I'm still blown away by what we do and the way that we keep expanding our services and responding to the needs of the industry. It's quite something, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. And it surprises me every time I talk to people about labs, the amount of people in the industry who don't understand what we do. And I know, I talk to Sue about this a lot, and she says the same thing, that she goes and talks to people. And it's a conversation that we have to have over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And that's why, because, people just don't know for one reason or other. Like NABS is, there's not enough of you. We need more people in NABS being able to go and do the work and tell the story, which is why the donations are so bloody important and why raising money is so important, because the more people that know about NABS and the more we can tell the story about what NABS does, the more people we can help in those amazing ways that we see when we go to Strangers in the Summer, we watch those videos. Those are just a couple, right? But there are thousands of those stories that NABS could tell every year.
Yeah,
And we
absolutely.
tell the story to more people, which is why we need those contributions.
So I am so glad that you mentioned the donations. So NABS exists on donations from the industry. That's it. We don't get money from anywhere else. So if the industry does not donate, we cannot exist. So
Correct.
that's why we're celebrating our donating organisations this year. The first ever Yay list, which is this year's industry list to build. You've heard of the A list. Well, this is the Yay list, which we're doing in partnership with Campaign Magazine. And the brilliant organisations who donate to us, they really enable us to carry out our mission. So I know this is incredible, Hamish, but there are some organisations out there who haven't donated to us yet.
Mm.
What's your message to them?
So my message to those people are, imagine your life without the person who you turn to when things get too tough, right? Just imagine who that person is and imagine what life would be like without them, without the person who listens to you without judging you and gives you help if you want it, gives you advice if you want it, or is just a shoulder to cry on and to listen to. Because, my friends, that is what NABS is for our industry. It's the personification of that human being that you probably have in your life that you go to. It's confidential, it's caring, it's empathetic, it's practical. It doesn't just listen, it really, really helps. That's what NABS is. And by not funding it, you're not allowing that person to help many others. I think the really important thing to remember is that advertising is a community, right? The industry is not huge. It's a community of people. And yes, we're a fiercely competitive community, right? Agencies fight over new business. Media owners fight over budgets. We all fight each other over awards. Like there was the Media Week Awards last night, and everybody was fiercely competitive, but they came together as an industry to celebrate. I will bet you around those tables, competitors sat with each other and made lifelong friends. People who had never met each other before, lifelong friendships are starting because I know my 25-year career in the advertising industry has led to lifelong friendships. My best man works in the advertising industry, right? Some of the closest people I've ever known here. And that's because we are a community. And I suppose I'd look at this and go, we look after ourselves. And by not contributing to NABS, you're not giving it the opportunity to do its work for this community of ours. You're taking away the opportunity for that person to have that person to go through potentially. And that stands and disappoints me.
Last year, we had more than 5,000 calls for the first time ever to our advice line. And they are clamoring for NAB services, and they are so grateful when they've experienced the transformative effects of having some therapy, of talking to the advice line, of going on one of our workshops.
Donating to NABS is not like just giving to another charity, right? So if there's an organization out there that goes, yeah, but I donate to loads of charities, this isn't just another one of those charities. I suppose the way I'd look at this, you're funding a safety net for the community that is the advertising industry, right? It means there's always going to be someone to help, either somebody who's in your organization or not. It shouldn't really matter, should it? We're part of this large, loving advertising community. And so whether the person they're helping is in your organization or not, surely it doesn't matter. I look at it and go, it's how we as humans help those people who desperately need help that will be judged by. And for those organizations that either aren't donating or are hardly donating at all when they could be donating an awful lot more, we're judging you, man.
Consider yourself judged by Hamish. Look, we're going to put a link in the show notes to the Yay list where you can find out more about it, and you can find out how to make your pledge so that you can give some money to support Adland and stop Hamish judging you. That is your essential task. You're obviously really passionate about the advertising community. What is it? What is it about that community that lifts you up so much? Is it that sense of friendship?
Yeah. I mean, it's cliche klaxon coming right now. And it is the people. I mean, it's as simple as that. Like I talk about advertising being in a community because it is. It's the fabulous people that I have met who lift me up. And it always has been those people. Like even in my darkest days, it was the people who made the difference. Like I rarely spoke to people about what I was going through because certainly back then, it just wasn't done. And that's something that I hope podcasts like this can change, is to make it okay to talk about it. So I don't really talk about it all that much, but just knowing that there was such fabulously kind, empathetic, energetic, creative people who I could hang out with when I was really, really dark, that lifted me up, And yeah, it is the people.
Well, having someone by your side is everything, especially when you're going through a tough time. And we know that and recognize that at NABS.
And that's why donating to NABS is so important. Come on, I'm going to be the single-handed sales push right here. Let's turn this into
Do
talk
it.
about mental health, but get people to donate, for God's sake.
Even if you have never donated before and you're not sure what to do, just go to the NABS website,
Just
NABS
go to
Yay
the
list
NABS.
page. Just go there.
And
We'll
even if
hold
you
your
had made it,
hand.
and let's go even further. Even if you had made a pledge and donated this year, can you give any more? Can you give any more? I bet you can.
There's also different ways to give as well. We've got more and more people organising community fundraisers.
There you go. Why don't you give us a long, detailed list of other ways that people can support?
Okay, so there's the community fundraisers. You could do an individual fundraising thing as well, such as running the marathon for us, which
Perfect.
has happened. We are about to launch a couple of other fundraising mechanisms as well, which I won't talk about now, but when they're ready, I'll put them in the
Put them
show
in the show notes.
notes. And then
Excellent.
perhaps your company might like to sponsor an element at one of our events. So we have a few absolutely cracking event partners who are with us year after year on events like the Manchester Fashion Show and Stranger Than Summer, which is our annual summer gala. and you can sponsor the bar. You can sponsor a raffle prize. Like, there are just so many ways that you can get stuck in. And you can sponsor the podcast.
Onto the podcast. Thanks.
No,
You said
yeah. You know what? No one has sponsored the podcast before, and now's a great time for someone to step up.
somebody's going to step up after this. Someone kind, loving, and decent is going to come along and sponsor this podcast. You watch.
Oh,
You're
I
out
really
there listening. I know you are.
That would be absolutely brilliant. We're all ears. We're ready to chat with you about that. So the key message is donate, 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 donate.
Yeah.
Now, you've been through a lot and you've come out absolutely sparkling. What's one thing you've learned about how to support yourself to get to this point?
Um, okay. Finding one thing is incredibly hard. I spent the last 5, 6, 7 years, I suppose, trying to figure out what I need to do. So I would say it's a mixed bag of things. Um, but for me, it's learning about the nervous system. I go back to that. I keep coming back to that. Look, it's all well and good understanding, what your triggers are and, why you have those triggers and why you have all these beliefs. But actually understanding how the nervous system works and understanding specifically about something called polyvagal theory and the importance of the vagus nerve, because if you can understand all of this stuff, you can understand how to really look after yourself. You understand the tools and the tips and the tricks that you can do when you're agitated, when you're anxious, when you're angry, when you're sad, how you can regulate your nervous system. Or what I mean by regulating a nervous system is essentially coming back to a place of equilibrium, a place of peace, a place from which you can be creative, you can have fun, you can be thoughtful, right? And you can really do that quite quickly, actually, if you understand the core tenets of how the nervous system works, and specifically about polyvagal theory. Now, for me, that means sunlight, that means exercise, that means hugging my family. And weirdly, that means ice baths, right? Ice baths might be horrific for many people, but for me, I love them and I have done for years.
Have you got one? How do you
I
actually
have.
do it?
Well, I started off just by having cold showers, and then I started off just by having cold baths. And then I just said, this isn't cold enough. I went mad and I bought myself an actual ice bath. It's basically an old wine barrel that's been converted, and I plug in basically a fridge and it pumps in cold water. So it gets to about 2.5, 3 degrees. And you spend 2 or 3 minutes in that thing 3 or 4 times a week and you come out bulletproof. It's incredible what it does. And I won't go into explain the neuroscience and the physiology behind it, but there will be your versions of those.
Your version of an ice bath.
Correct. And look, if people want to understand more, there are books that I've read on this. But one of the most powerful books I read was a book called Dose by a guy called a neurologist or a neuroscientist called TJ Power, where Dose stands for dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. Those 4 drugs are probably the most important drugs for your mental health. And what he talks about in this book is why modern day society screws with our ability to produce those 4 drugs and how we're living our lives today in the 21st century. So goes through all of that and explains what we can do differently to reduce the negative impacts that we're having, but also to stimulate more growth of those drugs and more production of those drugs. And in there, it's got loads of different things. That's why I choose sunlight, exercise, hugging my family, and diving into ice baths. But, your versions might very well be different. And I think that book, my tip to people is go buy that book, go learn about the nervous system, go learn about dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, and give yourself the best chance of coping whatever shit you're going through right now.
I'm going to find the book, pop it in the show notes, and find my version of an ice bath.
Go for your life.
Hamish, you have been an absolute delight.
Oh,
and
it's been lovely
it's been so lovely chatting. And I'm so glad that you have come through your tough time and you're at the other side and you're still helping Adland. So thank you very much for everything you do for us. Go and have a lovely ice bath to celebrate.
I've already done that today. That's probably why I'm so energized and energetic. But all right, lovely chatting to you, Louise, and have a lovely weekend.
Thank you, and you, Hamish. Thank you so much.
All right.
Take care. Bye.